Dave Nilsson,
I'm Kirsten Nilsson.
and we are Mormons, and we have a son who's gay. Where did it start?
You know what? It started when he was born with our son. I think, for me at least, I always felt like if I go to BYU and I meet someone and we get married and we do all the things that we're supposed to do, then everything will work out the way it's supposed to, and our kids will go on missions and get married in the temple, and it didn't happen that way. But I can't say it's a different way, not necessarily a bad way or a disappointing way, which has been a journey that we've been on to kind of reconcile that. But yeah, this is hard because I get super emotional about it. I just really feel blessed to have a gay son because he has taught me really a lot about love and acceptance and not making assumptions about people and just really unconditional, beautiful love. And that's how we feel about him.
Yeah. One of the easier things about having a child that's gay is that it doesn't happen overnight. At least with us, it didn't. Mm-mm. You know, we from a very early age, we were adapting to him and trying to understand what was good and what wasn't.
Well, and he was a gender non-conforming child, which I've learned all this terminology in the. And so it was concerning when he was a little boy and wanted to do things that most little boys didn't want to do, which part of me loved that he did that, but another part of me was scared. And I'm not sure, I mean...
I totally agree with that.
I think I was just scared because I couldn't see how, as far as my testimony and the gospel were, how I was going to reconcile that if it did turn out that he was gay. So it's been a journey.
Yeah. But it's fun to think back on some of those things, like his obsession with Barbie shoes.
Oh, loves Barbie shoes. The sparklier, the better. And he loved to wear... my mom made all these fantastic Halloween costumes, and his favorite one was the Snow White dress that he wore for like 4 years straight. Anyway, but I think too that the more he grew and was in elementary school, and you know, we were careful not to ever label him, so it was sort of an elephant in the room a little bit because we were both thinking about it and wondering if that were the case, but he was a little boy, so we couldn't. But
we never really had to confront it because no one confronted us on it.
No.
You know, so we kind of just let him grow and tried to, I think, nurture him as best we could. You know, I will say as a father, you know, when he was younger, you know, I did want him to be a certain way, and I was too strict in many ways. Not that it had anything to do with him being gay or not, but really had to do with him as an individual and me as an individual, and just that kind of almost normal conflict that
father and son at about 11 or 12.
Yeah, but even before that, and I was recognizing, I think you were too, that it wasn't productive. Mm-hmm. And we actually sought out some help from some family therapists, which were really helpful to me in particular because it helped me start the journey of being more empathetic. Mm-hmm. You know, really trying to understand how he felt, what things were positive for him and which things were negative or having a negative reaction, and started me adjusting how I was parenting, which I'm really grateful for now. Not that I didn't make my share of mistakes, but at least it minimized them and kept me on the right track.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to talk about when he called me when I was on a business trip. I was in Oakland going over the Bay Bridge into San Francisco, and he called me. I think he was 13, wasn't he? 12 or 13. I don't know. And he started to ask me about doctrine.
About Mormon doctrine and homosexuality.
And of course, we had an idea that he was gay or could be gay. But of course, he hadn't developed far enough in his own maturity to really know for himself, let alone tell us. But I remember giving him the answers that I had been taught and talking about how a family is happier and the children are better off if they have a mother and a father. And but I have a very distinct memory of that conversation because that's, I think, where I was conflicted. That's the first time I recognized it.
Well, and that's funny because I remember being in the kitchen and having him say something to, like, well, Mormons are okay with gay people, right? And they're like, you look back on these sort of turning points, and I remember saying, well, no, not really. And now I think, oh my gosh, what did I just say to my beautiful, tender little boy? I mean,
yeah.
I don't even know if it was as monumental to him as it was to it's become to me looking back.
Yeah. I was starting to become more and more aware about what the doctrine isn't within the church, and it really is not very deep or there's not a lot of material out there, let's say. As we looked for help, we couldn't find a whole lot. And this was a while ago. There's a lot more material out there now. We intentionally found a therapist that was LDS, that was in a practice dealing with these types of issues, really looking for help, looking for guidance in there. And I was surprised that he really didn't have anything specific to help us with other than how to be good parents. Mm-hmm. And worked with our son too to help him be true to himself and to help him talk about his feelings openly, which he hadn't done before. And even though we knew he was gay, or we thought we knew he was gay, we just hadn't spoke about it openly. And so the therapist helped him address it with us and helped us kind of prepare for that moment. Not so much prepare us, but prepare us in helping him go through that transition, a very important transition, which, again, I didn't recognize as being that important until after it happened. Mm-hmm. And when I could then talk openly with my son and hear about how he felt, that's when the whole world opened up to me.
Mm-hmm. It was actually really kind of a sweet... when he came out, he invited us out to dinner. He was 13 and said, I really want to go to dinner at this Thai restaurant. I remember exactly it here in Park City on Main Street, and where we sat and everything. And I just kind of felt this. I mean, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was just something like, okay, yes, I'm gay. Like, I can finally say it out loud to you, and I'm so glad that we can get this out in the open instead of, dancing around it. And
it was a happy moment.
Yeah, it was. It really, really was. And it was a relief, in a way, as a mom. Because then, I don't know, you're always thinking, and it's such a process to adjust to. But like he said, we'd kind of been adjusting his whole life. But to finally know, okay, this is the direction that it's going to go, most likely.
When I came out to my parents, they said, we know, for a lot of different reasons. I lived with these people. They raised me. They knew, and I knew that they knew. And for a long time, there was this sort of unspoken understanding. But having that out in the air made such a difference. And shortly, I told them, and there was a period of reflection on both of our parts, but soon, we'd be driving in the car just to piano lessons or something, and we'd get these little conversations going, and they weren't particularly deep, or, we weren't really dealing with heavy issues, but just sort of little conversations about, how are you doing in church? Is anyone being mean to you? Are you okay? Just little incidental questions. And I still remember those conversations, and they totally helped my relationship with my parents grow. And yeah, they were really important to me, and they still are. When I think about my parents and and the rest of my family and the church. It's, yeah, that dialogue was really, really important.
You know, I think he was in like 7th grade. He was young. And we were, as a mom, I think, at least for me, I was more afraid I wasn't afraid of his being gay. I was more afraid of how people would treat him because of who he was, especially in junior high or middle school, or how that would
or all the challenges
play
that
out.
would
Yeah.
be in front of him.
So,
well, in fact, at that dinner, it was interesting because he really wanted to shout it out to the world.
mm-hmm.
And being conservative, cautious parents, we were trying to gently say to him, look, you came out to your parents. Now let's take this slowly and allow it to settle for a little bit. But he didn't want to. And so he was, I think, online, on Facebook, shouting out to the world, which I think was, in retrospect, okay, because he needed to go through that. Mm-hmm. And he did get a negative reaction from some people, and it did cause him to pull back a little bit. But I think he needed to test that envelope. And I now that I look back on it, I'm okay with it. It was a hard thing for us as parents to watch. But it wasn't that bad. I think it was okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like Dave said, it just causes you to think, to be so much more empathetic and think how must he feel inside, and what, when people would, I don't know, I just remember going to church. He has a pretty big personality, and so everyone knows him and everyone loves him and everyone loved him then. But I can remember going to church because there was a period of time where he'd come and he wasn't happy, and so I think we started anticipating that was going to drop off. And I think we were okay with that because, again, as a mother, I became like this mother bear. Like, look, anybody at church come up to him and say anything. I mean, you're not going to send him a message that there's something wrong with him. So I might have gone too far the other direction, almost. I don't know. And
I wouldn't say I was okay with him not going to church. I was okay with his decision not to go. I would have rather had him there, close to us.
Right. It was hard to sit there.
Experiencing that spiritual side.
Right.
Yeah. I think that was a little bit hard.
Yeah, you're right.
But he does have a very strong spiritual sense, which I think has really helped him quite a bit through his journey. And
well, when he was in high school, he sort of really backed off from the church, and even so much so that he would say, I just remember him giving his talk or speech at the high school, and he was talking about something about Mormonism, and he said, he made a little joke about it or something, and he said, well, I'm allowed to say that because my family's Mormon. But it was like, my family's Mormon, but I'm not.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, okay, if that, that's how you're going to negotiate it. But then he went away to school in Seattle, and I remember talking to him after just a couple of weeks that he'd been there, and he said, I have never talked about the church more in the last 2 weeks than in my whole life. And even now he would say that he's been there for almost, I guess, 4 years. And he said people are, and so he really has turned around and kind of embraced it as part of who he is and accepted it, and really, I think, honors the tradition, his pioneer heritage. And there are a lot of things that he loves about the church, and he's been able to hang on to those things, which is the most that I could
and identify as Mormon.
Yeah, and he'll say, I'm a gay Mormon. And people will say, how do you do that? It's like, just like this. So.
Yeah.
It's not easy to be gay and Mormon. As someone who identifies as a gay Mormon, it's been difficult for my parents. It's also been difficult for me to keep the church in my life. I could have let go. I could have thrown it out, but I don't want to. There was a point where I took a break from Mormonism, and it definitely would have been easy for me to let go of Mormonism, but I've chosen to keep it in my life. And that kind of balance takes maintenance. It's an ongoing project for me to maintain my Mormon identity, but I've decided that it's worth it because it's there, and it's warmth and it's community and it's love, and all those things are very important to me.
And this whole concept of empathy, though, is, this is part of the journey that I've been on that's really been beneficial to me is, when it's someone else who's removed from you, that doesn't live in your home or maybe not even in your community, it takes an awful lot to really understand their point of view. But the closer that person is to you, the greater the opportunity to really try to understand how they feel. And, this is where I really appreciate Soren opening up and really helping me as a heterosexual, as a father of someone who's gay, to understand how he feels. And it was great. And, I think if I had a very close friend that opened up to me, I could have accomplished it that way. But when it's your own son, I think it's more immediate, isn't it? And you're more vested in that. But I remember the example, and I don't even know if he remembers this or not, but he says, "Dad, imagine waking up one day and the whole world has flipped, and it's normal to be gay, and it's not to be heterosexual. And someone came up to you and said, to fit in, you need to be gay." And then he looked right at me, he says, "How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you can switch and be gay? Do you feel like you want to switch and be gay?" And really the light bulb went on right then, because then I realized, wow, my sexuality it's deeper than that. We label it as sexuality, but it's actually much more core to us. It's so much more of who we are as a person. It's our character, it's identity. Our outlook, it's our identity. And when we talk about it from a spiritual point of view, that identity isn't just our physical being, right? Mm-hmm. It's our spiritual being. It's who we were, it's who we are, and it's who we will always be. And to ask someone to change something that's that integral to them, that's so much a part, then all of a sudden seemed absurd to me. Mm-hmm. And I understood it from that point on in a much deeper way than I had before. And it helped me really on that kind of spiritual side to say, okay, what is my role here as a father? Is it to make sure he goes to church every Sunday and he goes on a mission and he gets married in the temple and has children? Is that my responsibility as a parent? Or is it really to nurture him on his journey and in his own experience, using my religion to do the best job I can to raise him and to support him, of course, throughout his life. I'm not just his father while he's an adolescent, but through his whole life. And I think that's where I started to really reconcile my religion with his homosexuality, and to understand that it actually enhanced my spiritual experience rather than degrade it or to take it away. It enhanced our relationship and our marriage rather than to degrade it.
Definitely. Yeah.
That was a great awakening.
Mm-hmm. I think the negative side of it actually came from, for me, as an observation wise, as a mother observing, it was with the kids at church, because I think that now in retrospect, I know they didn't quite know how to be around him and how to, so scouting activities and campouts and, and no one ever talked about it at all. So I just felt like people were kind of looking at him and thinking, oh, wow, how is he? And I would be like, he's so great. Obviously you don't know him but I think they were just looking at it from their church point of view and, he's not coming to church anymore and that kind of thing. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, the kids in church, especially seminary, didn't really know how to respond to him because they had the whole background of church and doctrine, and so they would get into these discussions, and of course Soren would defend his position and they would defend theirs, and I think it created some friction there. But for the most part, it seems like we're beyond that now, where a lot of the kids at church are starting to understand empathy and understand that there's a good portion of people out there, both within our ward or in our church and outside, and it's not us and them anymore. It's us, and it's us, and these are our people.
And we're all one people,
we're all one.
Which is, that's something that I've always been really aware of. And even, still sometimes in Relief Society or in a Sunday school lesson, it'll come up, that gay marriage right now is kind of a hot topic, and if people are brave enough to mention it in Sunday school, it's usually in a very conservative way. And I used to just kind of suffer in the back and think, oh, they don't get it. They don't understand how I feel. But even in just the last few years, I've become more able to talk about it. And everyone in our ward knows our family and loves us. And they know
And there have been some other kids that have come out since then, too.
Yeah.
So people are starting to understand that every family is touched by it some way or another. But, getting back to gay marriage, it's the personal side of it that really helped me, which is it's not just equal rights for gay people. It's I have a son who wants to be loved and wants to love someone else and wants to have the experience that we have.
Right.
And within the church, he's not allowed to do that. He's asked to be celibate. And that's the hard part, is when it's your son or your daughter, and you realize, wow, if someone came to me when I was a teenager and said, oh, by the way, you get to be celibate the rest of your life, I know how I would react to that. And, and it's not just the physical relationship. In fact, it's much deeper than that.
Oh, it's so
much deeper than that. It's that
connection.
Idea of loving someone and being loved in a very committed, deep way. And to think that my son is denied that within the religion that we love and that we practice was hard. And so then we started looking for ways, how do you reconcile this? And I think that kind of led us to a more spiritual level on this, where we're looking for answers. And of course, we're taught that we can each receive personal revelation, that we can go to our Heavenly Father in prayer and do like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of other Mormons had done. And basically what we had done is we looked for our own testimonies. But, this was a different topic, and we did it. And I think we both arrived at our answers individually.
Yeah. I remember, I don't think that Soren had come out yet. I think he was 12. It was close to the time that he came out. And I was really, I can't even say nervous, but just concerned about how I was going to be able to bring these two things together in my life and be an effective parent and love my son and still feel like I could participate in the church without, feeling like a rebel or, I don't know, something. But I remember going to the temple, and I'm not really one to have these, profound temple experiences. So it wasn't something that I was anticipating, but I was just thinking about him through the whole temple experience, and I got to the end and was sitting and just thinking peacefully and kind of praying about how to figure this out. And I remember this just really intense wave of love, just warmth and wrapping all around me. And the message was just, you just love him. That's what you can do. And you're really good at that. And I remember really feeling like that was a real answer to something big. I mean, it's about the only time I feel like I've just been so not even confused, but didn't have any idea what to do. And so after that, it was really easy for me because I just loved him.
Yeah, and and it's easy to find justification for that too. When we really go back to our core beliefs of Christ and his teachings, it makes it real easy, which is to love everyone and to care for them and to be a positive force in people's lives, using Christ as an example. And that's kind of comforting because it kind of gets rid of all the noise, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think that for me, and I think probably for you too, that the gospel for me has become very simple. mean, it's really about love and helping people feel Christ's love and my love, and however I can make someone feel good about themselves, then I want to do that. And I hope that, I mean, I think that as far as the church goes, I have to have hope, because I hope that something will be examined more carefully, or resolved, or at some point, and I don't know if that's going to be in 5 years or 50 years or, however many, but I have to have that hope, because if I don't have that, I don't know how to make it work. I mean, I can't believe one thing and deny him all of that because of who he is. So,
and it's helped me too to see more and more families dealing with the same situation. And we've had the chance to go and meet with other parents and families and gay children, all at different stages of acceptance or understanding, and to be able to look at it and see the whole range of emotions and experiences that we went through to get to where we are today, and then be able to help those people through those
There've
stages.
been several people in our, I would say I can think of 3 families, and even some leadership that surprised me that came to me recently, and they wanted to talk to me about how I felt about our experience with my son, because their daughter, they had just found this out about their daughter, and he didn't feel like he'd handled it very well, and it was a very unusual conversation where I could just tell him exactly how I felt and not feel like there were going to be consequences for it. It was really great for me, because I felt like maybe I was drawing too much attention to myself because my son asked me to be part of the Mormons Building Bridges in the Gay Pride Parade in Salt Lake, which I did, which totally surprised me how much I felt, how much love I would feel, and just this tremendous outpouring. And it actually reminded me a lot of my experience in the temple. So, but I also worried that people in our ward were like, wow, what's she doing? How far is she going to go with this? But to have these other families come and talk to us, and they'll say things like, oh, you've done such a great job. He's such an outstanding young man, and he couldn't have had better parents. And I just feel like it was something else that led us to that. Like, we're not responsible. I mean, I just feel like it was the right thing to do. Like, there was no other question. There was no other way to do it. That's how I felt.
Well, I mean, it's hard for us to even imagine an alternative, which is
to reject him.
To ask him to move out, to ask him
to change.
Yeah, or to not date, or to be celibate.
That was another funny thing. I can remember when he was like 15, and we had this conversation like, so how does this work when you're gay? Is it the same? Like, you can't date until you're 16, or if you go by the church, it's like, well, you can't date anyone ever. So 16 or not, So we kind of adapted things in our own.
But which is actually, even though the guidelines aren't there for a gay person, I mean, there's a few sentences here and there. But the reality is it's great. You date when you're 16. Here's how you show respect for another person. Here's how you get to know someone. Here's how you court.
Right.
Here's why you abstain from a physical relationship until you're more mature and can handle that. And, here's the advantages of doing that within the bonds of marriage. Oh, wait a second, you can't get married. Well, okay, we'll hold off on that one. There's some challenges to it, but at the same time, we still had those discussions with our son, and he still comments about the wise the wise counsel, the wise guidance, the experience that we shared with him about how our relationship developed and why it's so strong, and how he can have that same type of relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, and changing the subject just a little bit, but I remember when he was in high school, and we were all, I don't know what we were doing, but we were all together, our 2 younger sons. And I remember him just turning to them and saying, okay, you know I'm gay, right? And they, you know, of course, they knew. And he said, but that doesn't mean it's any different. Like, so if you have a girlfriend and there's some trouble and you want to talk about it, I know how that feels. It's the same feeling. It's just a different person, which I thought was so kind of lovely.
Yeah.
And our younger boys, I think, have really benefited, and their point of view has been so broadened, and they're sensitive to those things that, you know, those comments that might occur in church too, and they'll, you know, they'll say something about, or at school, or yeah, I think that.
I mean, it's still very common at school for a boy to say, "Oh, that's so gay," or something like that.
Yeah.
Not really meaning it to be hurtful, but
it's
they're
just
sensitive to it, and they help, you know, the others understand that it's not a good thing to say.
Yeah. So, it's. I mean, it's really been so great for our family, I think.
Yeah. We're all on our own journey of understanding, and we're at different places in that, and you kind of have to. You have to allow people, you can't expect them to be perfect and have the perfect response. You can't judge them because they don't have a perfect response. You just have to help them along on their own journey and their own time frame of understanding.
Yeah.
And that's helped us a lot too.
Well, and I have to say too that I was really glad that we didn't live in California during Prop 8, because that would have just stabbed me in the heart, and I wouldn't. Another thing that I don't know if I would have known how to cope. And I remember talking about people that that are in different places. I remember Soren's grandmother. I called her one day, and she said, "Oh, I have to go. We've got a phone bank for Prop 8 at our house." And I was like, "Wow, okay, I'm gonna hang up now." And I know that she had no idea what was happening in our family, just because it was removed from, and he didn't want them to know necessarily at that point. But she consequently found out, and has been nothing but supportive. And I think that if that were to happen today and they came to her and said, "Will you do this at your home?" I don't think she would have. I mean, I think he has really changed more than just us. Yeah. I mean, you know, just...
Well, I have to say, it's not a statement against the church. It's really a statement of understanding for someone who's close to you that's gay. You know, I don't think that any of us have any ill feelings towards the church or the doctrine, because, again, we become more understanding of our son and his feelings, and it goes both ways. We become more understanding of the church and the process that the church and the church leadership goes through to help understand difficult situations, whether it's this or other difficult, you know, situations that have happened with doctrines in the church over the past, 150 years or so. And it's still hard when you hear a church leader say something that doesn't seem very insightful or doesn't seem to be informed by direct experience.
Or that may be very black and white.
Yeah.
But
we also have more patience with that, I think.
Yeah. I think that's the difficulty that I have sometimes with, there will be some conference talks, or some conference talks will be wonderful. But the ones that I find wonderful are the ones that are about putting our arms around each other and being more accepting. And I'm really uncomfortable with the idea of you're in or you're out. Like, there's a line that and it's complicated because I know that there's doctrine around that. I just feel like there has to be a place for everyone, because I know that, I really know that our Heavenly Father created all of my children exactly the way they should be. So that's what I was saying before about hope. I have to hope that it will change something. I don't know what it is, but that there will be a better place for him, rather than asking him to be celibate and not have love. That was another thing that was really, I think that was the thing that hit me the hardest when he came out to us. And I remember talking to our bishop about it and talking to the stake president, and I just kept saying over and over, I can't ask him not to have a close relationship, or to have someone that cares so much about him. He needs that in his life. So but I'm surprised at how many people, like you were saying, who have these more personal relationships or have it in their families, or how much more understanding and how fewer answers they have. You know, I remember going to our stake president at the time and having him say, wow, I don't know what to tell you, you know, which was so much better than what I expected him to say, you know, which was, well, this is really a problem and we need to fix it. And he didn't say that at all. So somehow that kind of gave me this avenue of hope, because he didn't know. So.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in one ward council where we were discussing a young man who had recently come out. And he was fairly open about it. You know, again, you know, went on Facebook. All his friends knew about it ahead of time. And as a ward council, you know, men and women sitting around, parents sitting around, and I was kind of being quiet, trying to see what direction this conversation was going to go. And I was really encouraged by how much love and caring, because I think that they all had their parent hats on, if you will, and not their, you know, defend the church doctrine hats. And I think that was a great way to lead into how do we deal with the situation. And dealing with that situation was, how do we care for this young man? How do we support him? How do we show love for him? And that was the conversation that we had, which was very helpful. And it was led by our bishop, and it was led by the young men's president and the young women's president. And I didn't have to say very much at all, and I didn't need to step up with my experience, because they were going down what I felt was the right path and what they felt was the right path. And it was really kind of nice. And I think around the same time as Prop 8, we had a discussion at the stake level. And I remember the stake president saying, okay, you bishops out there, I need you to understand that if you have a gay couple in your ward, it's okay for them to date and to hold hands and to sit together in church. And I just want you to know that. That's okay. And I don't want to hear anything else about that. You know, and that wasn't, hey, it's okay that they get married in the temple or anything like that. But it was a big step that was said openly and publicly, which I think for a lot of us parents out there, it was really nice to hear, even though it was in some ways a small thing, in other ways it was a huge thing.
Well, and I think sometimes, getting back to that whole idea of us and them, I think people just assume that you can't be gay and Mormon, whatever that means, at the same time. And I just feel like I kind of feel like there's a lot of things that we don't know, and that the church has evolved over, you know, its span of, how do you say that, lifetime? I don't know. And so when I talk about hope, I guess that's what I'm thinking of, is that there will be some kind of further conversations. Because I know, I mean, and I do even feel like in the last several years, maybe 5 years, that there's been a big change, even just in the conversations. And it used to never come up in conference or any, you know, it was just not something that anyone talked about. And it doesn't, you know, I think if it's not in your life, you may not notice how much more often it's mentioned, but it does come up more. And it's not going to go away. That's the thing. And especially in society, I'm so glad that my son is gay now as a 20-year-old rather than when I was growing up. It would have been so much harder and so much, you know, so much more heartbreak that he's not going to have, hopefully. So.
Well, and we're really in a situation where he's happy, healthy, in a wonderful relationship. And we couldn't hope for anything more than that. Yeah. I mean, it's wonderful. Good. But I think the message there that we've had over and over again is that it isn't us and them, it is us. And these are our families, and this is our ward family, and this is our church, and this is our community. And we're helping each other. And the more we help and the more we talk about it and come together, the happier our children are going to be, right?
Yeah.
And the better and stronger lives that they're going to have. And it's that conversation that starts that helps, that helped us as we were going through this process of understanding, and now we can pass that on to others. And so that their children will have, hopefully, just as equal of an opportunity to have a wonderful life, rather than feel discriminated against or repressed or somehow limited in who they can be.
As I got older and became aware of other people who were raised in the church and were gay or queer or lesbian or transgender or things like that, a lot of them really became very bitter about the church and very, very angry. And I think I went through a brief period of that, but I think because of the way my parents were open with me about the church and their relationship with the church, we talked about their testimony and their spirituality, and we talked about mine, and there was difference there, and that was okay. I think more my experience has been people, like I had said, being really negative about the church and just kind of pushing back and taking a very anti-Mormon stance. And I was open to feeling that way, and it never came for whatever reason. And I think, how my parents spoke with me and the openness they had with me has a lot to do with that.
Well, and I have to say that our son is not active in the church. He talks about it, every now and then, and kind of wants to go, but I think there's something still, that makes him feel uncomfortable there. And as a mom, I can understand that, so I can accept that about him and not feel disappointed or, worried that he's not attending, because I think in a way I can understand the pain that he feels by being there. But I hope, keep using that word, that there's some way to reconcile that there will be a day when he can go and feel really comfortable.
Well, and I think what he does like about church, he still feels and remembers, and that's why he talks about going back to church, is he wants that spiritual feeling again.
Right. So a scripture that I really, really love that kind of guides me in so many ways, more than just about this issue, but in all the way that I think about what our calling is in the church, is in Doctrine and Covenants, section 81, verse 5. And it says, "Wherefore be faithful, stand in the office which I have appointed unto you, succor the weak, lift up the hands which hang down, and strengthen the feeble knees." And it's interesting to me because I used to look at that as that's something that I need to do for other people, but I have since felt those feeble knees and my arms hanging down, and I've had, there are great people out there that have really helped me and, kind of just stood behind me and said, no, just stay where you are. You're okay. Because I can't say there's been a time when I wanted to just leave the church, but there have been numerous times where I've thought, I don't know if I can really have that conversation in Relief Society again. I mean, it's hurtful. And so I don't know, so it kind of goes both ways. That's why I love that scripture. But then there's another one in Mosiah. And it's talking about, it's after the waters of Mormon and the baptism, and it says, it's verse 21, 18:21. It says, "And he commanded them that there should be no contention one with another, but that they should look forward with one eye, having one faith and one baptism, having their hearts knit together." So sorry. "In unity and in love, one toward another." And to me, that's what it's about, because I'm so knit together with my son. And I can't imagine that there's any other way that I should be. And I feel that way about my husband. And what a wonderful thing if the church if we could all be that way together.
It's important what we say to our children, especially when they're young and they're having these feelings, but they don't know what they are. They don't know how to express them. They may not even know how to discuss it with their parents, which is probably the case. And yet we're sending them messages. And that's basically what happened with us with our son, is we didn't know how to support him when he was trying to discover who he was. And I think that's where we need to be more proactive in the church, is to really understand that we as parents, as church leaders, as members in our community, we need to understand that a 10-year-old may start having these feelings, and we have to be careful not to alienate them or to make them feel uncomfortable, but help them be who they're going to be and be confident, loving members of our community, of our church, and of our families.
So I think that there's something with the language of the church that needs to change in those lessons. And maybe it's just a sensitivity issue, because actually I was recently called as Young Women's President, and when the bishop called me, I really told him, I said, you know what, there's a lot of things I don't know. I used to know a lot more than I do now. And so I feel really, what's the word?
You were conflicted?
Just kind of, or inadequate. Like I don't have that, that the way I look at that kind of a leader, like the guidance factor or something, I don't know. Anyway. And it was really nice because he said, you know what, I think because of your experiences, you'll bring that and be a really great Young Women's President. And I thought, I'm so glad that there's a bishop that feels that way, that I can help.
From a really, really young age, my parents taught me that the message of Jesus Christ and of our faith was to love one another, and that's the basis. At one point, my mom was called to be Relief Society president, and I got a lot of great words out of her at that point. One thing that I really heard was one day, she'd been out doing some visiting teaching or something, and she came back and she looked really weathered, and she kind of said, what I've realized these past few months is that everybody's got something, everybody's struggling, and you're not alone. And that what I took from that is that this faith can act as a platform for people to come together in that way. And I think that's something that both of my parents have taught me, is that this faith is about bringing people in and closer to each other. And by coming close to each other, we draw closer to our Heavenly Father and our Heavenly Mother.
When my son was young and we were kind of going through the process of understanding what it means for him to be gay and what that means for us as parents, I initially felt very ill-equipped to deal with it. And I can't say I was panicked, but I was looking. And I think that's why we went to therapists and we were trying to find websites or books on the subject. I mean, we were really grasping. And while all of that was helpful, I think what it really came down to was really the teachings that we find in the scriptures and that we were taught at church, which is to love one another, right? Mm-hmm. And to understand that we all are here in this imperfect world, yes, to become perfect, but we still have to go through this imperfect world to somehow obtain that perfection or that life after death, that is a higher life, if you will. And that it's okay to be imperfect in this life. It's what it's meant to be. And that we're here to help each other. And once we kind of once I got to that point of understanding that that is the true religion, which is a Christ-like attitude towards everyone, and to be loving and caring, that was really the answer mm-hmm. in all of this. It wasn't, here's what you do on a Thursday, or here's what you do when they want a date, or, it really was none of that. It was really just that basic instinct of Christianity, of loving him and caring for him and listening to him and answering his questions when he had them.
I think the interesting thing about that too is that when you approach relationships that way, that you just want to be loving and help each other, it takes a lot of the fear away when you can somehow get across to another person that you're not going to fight against them, or that you want to accept them for however, whatever kind of person they are. And so, like we said before, I think that his the way that he's grown up has helped us to be more that way. And I'm just really grateful. I mean, it's a really good thing, and which I think a lot of people might be surprised to hear, but it's nothing but good.
I think we're stronger in our
Yeah.
beliefs and our spirituality and our testimonies of the gospel because we've had to practice it at a very high level.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
and even with people, I can remember a couple of years ago feeling like I don't want people to judge me. I don't want people to look at me and think, oh, I'm not sure what I thought they were thinking. Maybe they probably weren't thinking anything at all, but at the same time, I had to be open to how other people, I can accept that other people feel differently than I do. And I think that that's a really important part of the equation, because I know not everyone has the same
experience and
right and point of view, and they have a different life experience. And so for me to feel like I'm not going to be judged, then I can't judge other people either. I try to take the emotion out of those conversations and just be present and loving and not confrontational or angry or upset. I don't know how you describe those feelings, but
Christian.
Yeah. It sounds cliche, but I have to say it gets better. You just live with the idea of it, and it's a very much a paradigm shift. And I think depending on the age of your child, and because it's a different kind of dream that you have to have for them. Because if you raise your children like we did, we thought, oh, he'll go on a mission, and slowly that kind of started to change into a different kind of dream. And sometimes that's a really hard adjustment. But it's been good. I don't know, what other advice would you?
Well, I think that sometimes we don't think of parenting as being something that you relate directly to being Christ-like. But that's really what helped me, is to say, if I am going to be truly Christ-like, how should I raise this child? What should I say to him or her? How do I react to things? Because there were a lot of times when it was difficult, when our son was really lashing out against us, not specifically against us, but
just in general.
But he felt
upset.
trapped, and he felt
Lonely.
uncertain, or he had a fear. And to be able to take that with patience, and so we weren't in a position to regret how we reacted to him at that point. But I very distinctly remember one night him saying, "Dad, this is going to get a lot worse. You are going to be really upset. You're going to be uncomfortable because of who I am." And I remember saying, "No, I'm not. You can do almost anything and I'm still going to love you, and it's okay." And yes, I could intellectually go to a place where, oh yeah, he could do something horrible that would really upset me, but that's not what was happening in that conversation.
No.
That conversation was, how far could he push it, and to the point where I would break down as his father. And we didn't.
Him. No.
We didn't.
But I think that
able to
was
see
something
beyond
that he didn't understand necessarily about us, that we were really committed. I don't know, what goes on in a teenage brain is a pretty special place. But I think he worried that we would at some point say,
that's enough.
Yeah,
Stop.
yeah. Let's reset this or whatever. And luckily we didn't.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, we had to get over the idea of not only do we not have to fix him, there's nothing here to fix.
No, that's it. That's it.
He's a wonderful human being, and he's different than us, as all our kids are, and we want to foster those things that make him different, and that's worked out.
Yeah,
it's worked out really well.
As I've gone off to college and met people, I've been with this wonderful guy now for a little over a year, and I went home for Christmas and he stayed here, and on Christmas Day I opened a gift from my parents, and it was a picture of my boyfriend and flight itinerary, and they actually surprised me by flying him in for Christmas, which was really exciting. It was nice to have us all spend time together, and for him to be with my family. You know, we're a ways away in Washington, so he doesn't get to see them as much as I see his family. But it's been really nice to have them, you know, welcome him into our life and into our family. It's been really great. And, you know, because my parents have that openness and accepting, I know that if I'm ever having trouble, you know, in that relationship or in that part of my life, I can look to them for support, and I have that always. And that's really reassuring. My family members are still resources I can draw on for strength, you know, for reassurance. And it's wonderful. I've never known anything but a supportive family. So it's which is really lucky, because that's not the case for everyone, especially for queer folks, for gay folks, for transgender people, you know. I think that rejection hurts, and it hurts in both directions. You know, it hurts parents, it hurts children, it hurts brothers and sisters, you know, but the relationships I have with my two younger brothers and my older sister, all positive, I think definitely come from my parents' approach, which is loving kindness. And I think that is what's central to our faith community, is a message of loving kindness.
You know, as a parent, but even as a church leader, you know, whether you're a young men's president or like I was in the bishopric, where you're interacting with the youth quite a bit and you care about them, and when they have difficulties in their lives, you experience that along with them, whether they're your children or not. But the deeper question that really came to me is, you know, how do I achieve the hopes that we have as Mormons, which is to, you know, be with our families forever and to have them close to you. And when you have a gay son, I think that the first question that you have is, do I need to keep him close to me within the doctrine of the church? And do I need to make sure that I hold true to those or force him to stay true to those doctrines, to make sure that he makes it, you know, all the way with us? And, you know, as I went through the church manuals, as I discussed it with church leaders, you know, I came to my own understanding, which was really a spiritual experience for me, which was, it's not to use tough love, or it's not to make sure that he adheres to the doctrines, but it's to love him and to keep him close and to support him on his journey, and to show him what a Christ-like attitude was, and to help him show that same kind of attitude to the people that he would encounter in his life. And that was really the answer, not whether he was in a gay marriage or not, but if he is ever in a gay marriage and in that important of a relationship, that he approach it with a Christ-like attitude, where he really loves and respects his partner and makes the most out of that relationship. To me, that's the goal, is to help him be Christ-like, and for me to become more Christ-like and patient with him, not whether he's in a gay marriage or not.
Or whether he attends seminary, or whether he...
Right. That's up to him. Those are his choices, and he needs to, follow the inspiration that's given to him to make choices. I know I've made plenty of bad decisions in my life, and I made good ones as well, and I know the difference, and I'm getting to know those differences more and more, and I want to teach him how to make good decisions in his life. That's my responsibility as both a parent and even as a church leader, to help the youth to understand how to make good decisions and to how to know when it's right and when it's wrong. And if they make a wrong decision, how to correct it.
Yeah.
But they're going to make wrong decisions, just like I did.
Well, and I feel like as a mom or as a mother, it's part of my responsibility from God to raise healthy, happy children. And if whatever it was in the church is going to cause him to be unhealthy, that's a conflict. I mean, but I'm so much better having him be healthy than just like you were saying, kind of staying within the boundaries or whatever we want to call it. So
yeah, I had a brother who made some decisions that really upset my parents, and I remember the very day when my mother said, "I'm sorry, we're going to ask you to leave the house, and I need you to give me the house key." And I remember how that felt as a brother watching that experience and thinking that, wow, if I were a parent, is that the decision I would make? And here I was in a position where I could have made that decision, but I could honestly tell you that was the furthest thing from my mind. It was not to push him away, but it was to bring him in closer and to help him through this challenge in life, and to have him help me too. Have him help me get through this as a parent. And that's exactly what happened, is we really helped each other through it.
One thing that really helped me actually was Carolyn Pearson's book, Circling the Wagons. Because I had never read very much about other people within the church, about their parental experiences, or and realizing that there were lots of different ways that people handled this. So that kind of led me to the whole idea in the song, "I'll Walk With You." Every time I hear it, I cry, because I feel that way so much. Like I just, anybody that's walking out the door because they feel like they're not accepted, I want to run after them and not necessarily drag them back in, but just put my arm around them and say, look, I know this is hard. I think that's the biggest thing, is just to validate that it's a difficult experience, and it's difficult I can't imagine how difficult it is for our son, or was, or, ongoing, but I know it was hard for us. I don't think it's as hard anymore. Plus he's older, and we've seen that he's, succeeding. And he's studying and doing well, so I just want to say that I'll walk with anybody that comes along. I mean, my heart is so in this, and I'll walk with you.